Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1256 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Thursday. And today's podcast is actually part 2 of 2. So if you missed part 1, go back and listen to part 1 with myself and Jake Rosen about the NBA draft. Wall-to-wall discussion between myself and Jake, who's very, very smart on this kind of stuff about the Hawks, the top of the draft, et cetera, et cetera. So that is definitely the best way to listen to the podcast. Part 1 first, then part 2 now. But if you're watching part 2 or listening to part 2 at the moment, plenty more to come and a lot of fun conversations to be had between myself and Jake. Please subscribe to the podcast. After the intro, I'll be back with more with myself and Jake Rosen.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Let's pivot to the Hawks, guys. Now, obviously, I've been saying for a while, I wonder if you agree with this as sort of a starting point. There's like 20 guys they could draft at 16, and it wouldn't totally stun me. So it's like really hard to go through all of them. We don't have to do that, but because I'm trying to get to like everybody with somebody along the way that's like kind of in play. My list wouldn't be that long, but I just feel like there's so much of uncertainty. It seems like you agree with me. Like it's kind of just flat-ish in that range. So I'm going to start here and then we can get into it. Obviously, this is hard to do because you don't know who's going to be available at 16, but give me like the semi-reasonable best possible outcome for the Hawks 16. Like, do you have a guy in your head that you would just love there? And obviously they could be gone by then. I'm not going to say like, don't say Jaden Ivey. Other than that, you can say any guy that's like reasonable.
Ivey is my dream Hawks.
You and Andrew Kelly are on the same level.
That is true, Andrew. But I would. I think that's as good as a fit and would potentially move the landscape of the East for years to come.
But honestly, though, like, okay, we're far afield, but that's fine. I just doing it to myself. There's this like, it's not even a rumor, but there's this like potential path where the Hawks get involved for the 7th pick from Portland because Portland wants to get better. They want John Collins, all this stuff. Like, I'm not saying it has to be guy at 7, but there are trade up or trade out avenues for the Hawks to land in that range of the guys I never talk about, like your Matherins and your Dyson Daniels and like that group that the Hawks are never going to get at 16, but they do have chances to go up and get those guys. Is there anybody in that group that you like would love in Atlanta?
Yeah, I just did this with the Knicks podcast I was on last night. Like I think trading up, if you're trading up, you better be in that top 4. Or honestly,
I totally agree with you. Totally agree.
I would not waste. I'm not even like I would not put up any assets to go from 16 to 7 because it's just so flat to me. Like there are guys that I like in that range, but even from a Hawks standpoint, like on my personal board, I would say like your 5 through 10, which I think is like a mini tier for me outside. I don't even know, to be honest. Like I've tried doing the rewatches. This draft is going to be so fascinating because it is as flat as I can remember, honestly. So I've Johnny Davis, AJ Griffin, Shaedon Sharpe, Tari Eason, Jalen Duren, and Dyson Daniels in some order. I don't know if any of those guys like fit exactly what the Hawks need. I'd be very interested in Johnny Davis. I think that is someone that if the shot comes around, you're talking about adding what I project as a plus guard defender alongside Trey, someone who can run second side actions, someone who can penetrate and get into the teeth of defenses on redrives, improved as a passer, can run second side actions. He's going to be interesting. I would wait till to see how the board shakes out with him because it does feel like he's going to be in that like 10-11 range with the Knicks and the Wizards. So maybe if he's on the board, I would feel comfortable giving up a little bit to move up 5 spots because I really, really like his game. AJ Griffin, while I'm a big fan of him, I don't necessarily know if he solves the Hawks' issues. Like, I think he can space the floor, but sure. The Hawks are interested. Like, the Hawks are in a different timeline, and I'm not saying that they need to win now, but you have Trae Young. You need to be competitive.
Well, and they're also trying to win. I mean, but just to give you some context, like I know that Travis Schlenk, as the decision maker, understands they don't have to push all the chips in to win this year, but like after the way last year went, from ownership on down, like there is some pressure to win.
You know what? And this is something I've been thinking about a lot because this is a sad little tangent, but I think it very much applies to the Hawks, and because they showed how this could come to fruition. A lot of times you get so caught up in, are they a number 1 player on the championship team? Are they the number 2 on a championship team? And then you sit back and what does that mean? Because from a year-to-year basis, the benchmarks for a championship team they are changing and constantly moving, constantly shifting. As an executive, especially when you have somewhat of a direction and a player of the caliber of Trae Young and supporting pieces like John Collins and such that the Hawks have, you just have to put yourself in a position to compete. And you put the best team forward, and you hope the chips fall your way, and a series bounces your way, and the ball bounces your way. And then look at you, you're in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like I think I've gotten so caught up, and I've been so guilty of this early when I was really fascinated by team building because it's such a captivating topic, is that there's a right way to do this. We're on this steady timeline. The NBA is not linear. That is one thing I've certainly learned. Like the Hawks, they're climbing up the Eastern Conference Finals one time. I'm picking them to finish second in the East, and they're getting smacked as the 8th seed. So like the NBA is not linear, and when you have a chance to compete and be competitive, which I think the Hawks do, with just the sheer talent that they have, like you have an obligation, in my opinion, to be competitive and try to win. That's why I didn't really. The Chicago Bulls, like they're a fun team, and they they caught a raw deal in the first round. And if they're the 4 or 5 seed, are we talking about them in a different light potentially? And I think you just have to put the best team out there and compete, and maybe win a series, maybe win a second series, and Ben Simmons doesn't take a layup, and a couple things fall your way. Like that's kind of how basketball works. It's super fluid. So side tangent, like when you do have a player of Trae Young's caliber, you should be trying to win, and you should be trying to be as competitive as possible. So that's why maybe I like Johnny, but he's probably the only in that range. Like I'm a big fan of Tari, big fan of Jalen Duren, but again, I don't think those guys are necessarily moving the needle in a way in which I would feel comfortable giving up assets. Of course, we don't know what it is, but I'm probably not making that call.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I mean, the way that I'll probably do a whole show on it at some point. If the I'm not just gonna, I almost said rumors. They're not even rumors, but rumblings persist that the Hawks might look to like move into that range or move Collins for a pick in that range. Like, I wouldn't want to have the 7th pick in a vacuum in this draft. Obviously, you'd rather have it than not, but it's not a great spot to be in my opinion. Even if I like some guys, to your point. So like, go ahead.
Yeah, what I was saying is, as a Knicks fan, like the Knicks, I think the stat is like the Knicks haven't moved up from their lottery position. They've only moved down for the past 20 years. And I was talking about, of course, this is going to be the year where they're going to move up for no reason. They'll move up to like 5th. I don't even know if that's possible with the new lottery. I feel like it's either like you climb in top 4 or you don't. But yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Like I think you're going to see a lot of teams in that 7 to 9 or 10 range trying to trade out and maybe pick up another pick later in the draft, pick up another asset moving forward. And like for me, I'm just standing pat and making my pick. It's the same thing I've been saying Knicks should do. Like there will be options at 11. Same thing with the Hawks. There will be options at 16. I don't necessarily think there's anyone. Maybe Johnny a little bit just because he really can fit the need, and if he can really help you out and be a potential long-term. Not necessarily backcourt partner, but someone you can play with alongside Trae Young where it's successful. But yeah, it's tough. It's super, super flat. And I would honestly rather just stand pat and make my pick.
We totally agree. I think that through that lens, I mean, I don't think Johnny's going to get to 16. That's not going to happen. The only guy that I caught your quick list there, I think the name Tari Eason jumped out to me because he seems to be at least mocked in their range. I think there was an ESPN mock today, I want to say, that was new that had the Hawks getting him at 16. And he's a popular idea for Hawks fans, in part because he's been mocked in their range, but also defensively, physicality wise, like he'd be pretty interesting. I wonder what do you make of him, because he's not a perfect prospect because nobody in this range is, but it seems like based on where he's on your board, that'd be a good value at 16 for the Hawks.
Yeah, no, one good value, and two, I just wrote about him and comparing him and Jeremy Sohan as two modern versatile forwards who are really good at defense in different ways. And Tari, the way I pitch Tari is, you can scale. So Atari, for just a quick spark notes of what his game is, he is a brash, modern 4, big wing who I kind of am comfortable pitching as like a big 3, smaller 4, about 6'8", relentless downhill slasher, very right-hand dominant, can be very erratic at times as a decision maker, both as a driver, as a passer, has refining to do. The game is not perfect. It's not. You watch him at LSU, that game, the way he was used, everything about it is not necessarily going to be translatable, as we were saying, with the LaMelo Ball polo, high school stuff. However, I believe that there's a vein in which you can kind of bottle up this erratic player who is all over the place and you leverage his best skill, which is straight line slashing, where he is an absolute monster getting downhill. Super positionally strong, has a capable handle, doesn't have like crazy counters, and the ball control isn't totally there at times, but in terms of getting straight line attack, getting downhill, taking contact, finishing through contact when he does get to the rim, he's money, absolutely money. And I think he made 43% of his threes in SEC play. So someone who's rapidly improving and rising shooter, improved his free throw percentage from his year. I think he shot 57% as a freshman and now was up to 80% as a sophomore. So someone who looks the part of a legitimate shooter who at least has improved as such this year. So the idea in my pitch for Tari, which fits very much the Hawks, is someone who, instead of employing him as an isolation driver and even a DHO operator, space him to the corner, let him shoot catch and shoot threes, and most of all, let him attack closeouts and get downhill against tilted defenses. Few guys in this class, if any, eat up space like he does downhill. The combination of strength and speed and just the willingness and sheer, like, he loves contact. He'll take it on the chin and finish right through you. And in addition to the defense and being super versatile, very instinctual in passing lanes, stocks monster, but also really capable at the point of attack. Is super quick, super strong, and I think could potentially give some big wings problems all around the league. So he's someone where it definitely requires a little bit of imagination and reining him in a little bit. But I do think if anyone is going to be able to put him in a role to succeed early on, it is the Hawks, just because of Trae Young's just capability of carrying such a heavy offensive usage load and then putting role players in advantageous positions to either shoot or attack and continue to pressure that defense. So I do think Tar is a very interesting one. And as you said, he's in their range. So he's someone where I'm much more comfortable waiting it out and seeing if he falls to me than trying to trade up in a straight goal with any of those guys.
Today's show is brought to you by Rock Auto, and the auto world right now has so many makes and models these days. It's actually pretty much impossible for any local chain store to have all the parts that you need for your car or your truck. And even if they had them, you actually want to deal with the person behind the counter. All they want to do is sell you what they want to sell you from the warehouse or behind their counter, in their computer, whatever it's going to be. Instead, use rockauto.com, and they have all the stuff that you want at home or in your pocket. It's a much, much better option. And why spend more for the same parts at a dealership or at a local chain store when you can get them at rockauto.com for much less? And honestly, the prices are reliably low for each and every customer. They're always the same as well. It's very, very helpful no matter who you are at rockauto.com. And it's been a family business for more than 2 decades at this point. And they have all stuff that you need. That includes, of course, brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even carpet. And rockauto.com has all of what you need to check it out today for sure. And when you get there, write Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box, then we sent you to them. That's very important. So write Locked On in that box that asks you how you got to rockauto.com. Amazing selection, reliable low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. This is more of a philosophical thing. I know what I think, but somebody asked me this offline the other day, and I thought it was at least an interesting thing to bring up, specifically because of Tari, but it applies to a lot of these guys. What do you philosophically think about, just let's just use the Hawks. The Hawks drafted Jalen Johnson last year. He fell in their lap, kind of unexpectedly. He fell further than he was supposed to fall, but obviously is similar positionally to someone like Tari Eason. Would you consider that in any way with this if you're the Hawks, considering that Jalen had basically a redshirt year this year? Like, he's basically still the same guy he was a year. We don't really know. He was pretty good in the G League, but just basically didn't play at all. Like, it's almost like I don't want to say drafting over, but that was the way that it was posed to me. Was like, wait, would you be drafting over Jalen Johnson? It's like, well, for me, no. But I want to know what you think about that whole idea, basically.
Yeah, it's really interesting because they are similar players. Jalen's a little bit bigger, and I think Jalen has more typical 4-man equity. Rather, I think Tari's more of a wing in time. Like, my issue with Jalen was that the driving just didn't look like what I thought it was going to be. When he got to do the big man stuff and operating on the roll, attacking some closeouts here and there, it looked better. And I think he's a much better passer. Definitely, like, not even comparing the two, but I do think, if Jalen hits in the way that the Hawks probably think he can, and if Tari hits in the way I think they can play together. It's a little wonky and a little janky, but I do think Tari can be your quote unquote 4 and Jalen can be your 5, or 4. Tari can be your 3 and Jalen can be your 4. Is what I was getting at. I do think Tari's ahead as a shooter. I think Tari's ahead as a driver. I think Jalen is ahead at doing or at playing the role and adept in knowing his responsibilities and being able to plug and play without, making wild mistakes that Tari could be prone to, especially early on. And I think Jalen's a little bit more ahead in the big man stuff, but Tari's definitely more ahead as a driver. He's quicker. He's a much better athlete, can really get downhill. So yeah, I do think they could either play together, and if not, I think those are two good, interesting pieces to have on your team. Yeah, another thing about the Hawks, they had one of my favorite drafts last year, and we haven't seen either of them. So
yeah,
I think
it's really weird.
It's like another cat in the bag. I'm hoping we see some Sharif. That was really my guy in last year's class.
Well, I mean, I couldn't believe you fell that far. Nobody could. I mean, it's one of those weird things that, as you would imagine, I'm taking a lot of questions on. Nate McMillan does not like rookies very much, and there's the whole they need to trade the pick because they won't play the guy anyway. There's that whole thing, and I'm not about that. I just think it's interesting, just in general, not even with just Tari and Jalen, but for me, anybody you take at 16 or 20 in a draft, especially after what amounts to a redshirt year, I personally wouldn't really consider Jalen Johnson when making this pick. If there's a guy that you like that's the guy you want to take, but he's a 4, I think you just take him anyway. And it becomes a good problem on some level. But and maybe it's a tiebreaker. If you were to put, let's say Tari's gone, you pick a 4 that you like in this range versus another guy, and if it's really close, maybe you think, all right, we already have Jalen Johnson. But if it's a tier break or something, you just take the guy and figure it. I mean, it'd be different if he was a top 5 pick. If it was a Kongwu from 2 years ago, you have to consider him. He's a number 6 overall pick. But if a guy's picked at 20, you might draft, quote unquote, draft over the guy. You might have to.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think the Hawks are in a really interesting place because they a lot of guys. That's
the other thing. There's no position where they just have this glaring. And that was the same thing as last year. The Jalen Johnson pick was clearly a BPA choice,
as well as Sharif.
Exactly the same thing. Sharif. They were. I mean, I can tell you from what I heard, they did not even imagine Sharif would be there for them, because why would they have thought that? And that was a guy at 20 that I was look, at 20 he's a great value, but you have Trae Young. You can't really take Sharif. But then at 44 or whatever it was, you have to take him. It's crazy. But same thing this year. They might make a trade, but as of this moment, there's not a quote unquote position on the board where it's okay, that's a spot you have to take. And even if there was, you don't draft that. That's not why you draft. I always say that. It's not why you draft.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's trouble in paradise, honestly. If you hit this pick, the Hawks are kind of on a Schlenk is on a pretty impressive run over the past 5 years.
He is on a good draft run,
of hitting in the draft. We can talk about.
We'll see on Jalen, but everybody else has been basically he's never missed a pick basically in the first round. The only one that's a miss is Amari Spellman. That was the 30th pick, so it's kind of a second round pick in some ways.
But I mean, we're talking about John Collins, Kevin Huerter, Trae. I would love to have Luka Doncic. I think.
But regardless, they still evaluated Trae very well. They nailed 100%. 100%. The process is another conversation, but Trae at number 5 in the draft is a huge home run smash.
100%. So, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is it's trouble in paradise. It's oh no, we've hit too many picks. What do we do with all these guys? And to that I say, you get them all in you get them all in the building. You go to practice every day. You disperse minutes and you make a decision. That's all you can do. There's shocker, surprise, you did too good. You were too good at your job. You're too good for your own good. That's it came out really bad, but that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that with this pick, and we haven't even talked about Agbaji and some guys in those vein, which it seems the Hawks already have that, but it's you don't know how these guys are going to out. You don't know. Agbaji might come in and light the Nets on fire, and he's older, and you can throw him in there right away, and all of a sudden that's your priority. He might not do that. Who knows? But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think they got to go best player available. I think they got to go someone with, and you have to act on the assumption that this player is going to hit. And if they do hit, can they complement Trae Young? That's my biggest thing for Atlanta specifically.
I totally agree. You draft around Trae, and within reason. I'm fond of saying you don't draft Mark Williams. You have 2 centers basically, unless you're going to move on for Capella. Maybe you think about that at some point, but in a vacuum, that's the only thing that I just wouldn't do is draft a pure 5 or a pure small point guard. That's kind of it as far as what I wouldn't do. So I want to ask you about some more guys now because we're here. You mentioned Abaji. Like he's very the way I've said it before is like he's the guy that Mike Budenholzer would have taken for the Hawks. Like when they were in that range where they just drafted a bunch of 22-year-olds, Torian Prince, DeAndre Bembry, all those guys. That might make some sense. Obviously, he's a pretty interesting prospect. But like, okay, I'm going to ask you to compare him to guys like that are kind of positionally similar. Like Malachi Branham's a name that's been mocked to the Hawks recently that I've seen, and it seemed like for a while he had like some top 10, 12 buzz, and it's kind of cooling off.
It seems to fade it out. Yeah.
Like, okay, let's just, I mean, we talked about John Davis before, but like Ochai versus Bram, I'm not saying they have to be one-on-one against each other, but like, what do you make of those guys? Because obviously the Hawks are in the market for more wings that can do things on offense.
I think Branham is more of an upside play. I do think like he is more secondary create. Like he definitely has more juice off the bounce. He's definitely not necessarily a great athlete. He's not going to get all these standstill rim attempts, but he is better operating off the bounce, especially in the mid-range game than Agbaji. More capable as a mid-range shooter. Versus Agbaji, I think Agbaji is more of a simple pick, and I think like I've been thinking about Agbaji to the Hawks for 4 months now. I think like when Mark and I first did our first,
I feel like everyone has like he's a very plug and play kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it makes sense, and again, it's like, what issue are you trying to solve, right? Like you're not. I don't think unless you want to get wild and go trade up for Jay Navy, I don't think you're solving your long-term secondary creation problem at 16 in this draft. Even if there was a guy there's not even a guy I could take that if you wanted to say, hey, we have a lot of plug and play wings in the room. We don't need another one. Give me your best creation gamble, and we're gonna take a flyer. And like, I don't know what it's gonna look like, but like that's what we're gonna do. I don't know. I can see them maybe doing that.
I understand that. Yeah.
My best answer for you is Blake Wesley. Who, like,
he was next on my list. I swear to God, next guy I was going to ask you about was Blake Wesley. So we can,
But like Blake Wesley, like, was not very good as a freshman.
Fair.
Like I'm very intrigued by Blake because there is such a way that it works, which is look around the country for 6'5" freshmen that are repeatedly beating their matchup time and time again and getting into the lane. List is very small. If there's not that many, and
it's also really interesting. Well, before I forget to say this, like a guy who was not a 5-star, like he was like a top 100-ish guy, but nothing great for him to come in, go to Notre Dame, and then like kind of not be that good. And then be a top 20 pick is like the weirdest thing. And I totally get it why, but like it's just a very strange trajectory because it wasn't like, because normally if you're that kind of prospect to be a one and done, you kind of have to be good as a freshman. He kind of wasn't good.
He kind of was not. Absolutely.
Weird. Yeah.
No, absolutely. That would be my one name where it's like if the Hawks front office was like, I'm done with these plug and play wings. We have a million of them. We're gonna have to pay him anyways. So we're gonna pay these guys. We might as well play them. And the ones they do have. I do think a flip side to that is I don't want to pay all these wings. If I can get similar value in the draft, why wouldn't I do that and save my cap and go elsewhere? Like that's a team building conversation, which I think the Hawks are much more equipped to have than a lot of guys who are going to be drafted. A lot of teams are going to be drafting the teens, but I think that's, neither here nor there. It's total preference. If your draft strategy, and again, we're talking about all about process here. If your process was give me the best creator bet who can play alongside Trey, and I would give you Blake Wesley. Now, I wouldn't put any money that it would work, and I don't even know if I'd attach my name to it, but I'd maybe anonymously hand you a little slip that says Blake Wesley. And I think that's like the only one I would give you. But other than that, like no one's Jaden Hardy. I'm not particularly enthralled by him. I do think he's getting underrated a little bit. 16 is probably a little bit too high for me, given that Branham would still be on the board likely. If Branham's off the board, Matherin's off the board, who I don't necessarily think solves your problems here either, because I'm not super infatuated with him as a creator. Maybe you give Hardy a look, but Jaden Harvey, Trey Young backcourt defensively, me and you are giving them buckets. So there's no simple fix, especially not in this draft, which like if the Hawks took Blake Wesley at 16, I would laugh, but I would get it. Like I would laugh because it's just like, oh, I know exactly what your process was. I know exactly how you land on this decision. I'm not saying I'd recommend it, but I just basically my long-winded answer is that I don't think they are fixing their one glaring hole, which I think me and you like to get to send that next level eventually. It doesn't need to be this year, doesn't need to be next year. whenever it is getting a secondary star alongside Trae Young. I don't necessarily think you're doing that this year. So, why sweat it?
Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. If you love a chewy chocolate brownie, I can encourage you to have a caramel brownie with caramel swirled on top. It's so very good. And what if I told you that actually you have all that deliciousness plus 17 grams of protein? You're in luck because caramel brownie bars are available at Built.com right now. You have to act fast because they're actually a fan favorite. They'll go very quickly. And forget about dessert, actually. They're better than dessert. Plus, the macros are absolutely unreal. 130 calories, 17 grams of protein, only 4 grams of sugar. I'd replace the regular brownie with Built's caramel brownie bar in an absolute heartbeat. And the best part is that caramel brownie bars at Built.com have 100% real chocolate on the outside. Like, for real, it really helps the taste and the texture of everything at Built Bar. And with Built, don't sacrifice taste for eating healthy. You can actually have both in one place. And all of the bars are made with collagen protein, which your body can absorb more efficiently. And that provides a ton of health benefits. There are a million reasons why you should try Built Bar right now. And just for today, let's just say caramel brownie will absolutely rock your world. It's not an understatement. It's really just the case. If you try it, you will definitely be hooked on caramel brownie Built Bars. And with Built, tasty is the new healthy. Built.com has all of what you need for the caramel brownie bars and much, much more. Built.com. And when you get there, by the way, use the promo code LOCK15 if you're a listener to this podcast at 50% off on your next order with Built Bar. One more time, that is promo code LOCK15, 15% off at Built.com. You made a really interesting point, which you kind of just ended with as well. Like, just the notion of being able to check that particular box in this range, in this draft, and really in any draft. Like, you're still at the end of the day drafting in the middle of the first round, and generally speaking, yeah, you could hit there. Like, there are exceptions. Giannis was 15th pick. I get all that, but like, your expectation level at this range does not need to be, number 2 guy on a championship team. Like, that's just not what it's supposed to be. Like, you're supposed to be able to get, you're hoping for a starter. Like, you're hoping for a good starter at 16. That's what you're hoping for long term. And that's just really interesting because, like, you're talking about guys like even Branham, who, by the way, do you think he can guard anyone? Malachi Branham, just as
the defense is also.
It was not good in college.
Yeah, no, the defense was not good at all.
Because that's part of the thing. I mean, you said about Hardy too, but like, they have to consider. And I'm someone who thinks like Kevin Huerter is an underrated defender, but all you ever hear is like how bad that is next to Trae Young. I mean, it is a question / problem. Like, you have to think about defensively how guys work on the perimeter in particular with Trae. And like, any more bad defenders, you get into some real peril. And if you think those guys can't be at least pretty decent, like, it's the same thing as like Ty Washington as like one of those like Kentucky combo guard, maybe he blows up kind of bets. And like, I kind of like that in theory, but can he guard anybody? I don't know.
His defense is better. It's definitely better than the others. And I was going to bring up Ty because Ty is interesting. I think if you were to give me like, what's your number one, like, realistic pick, we're assuming Branham, and I might even like Ty. I recently, Mark and I have been debating Ty Branham all year, or for the past couple of months, because they're very similar. They're off guards who are shooters. They're not going to get to the rim a ton. They're capable passers, but not going to wow you away as passer. I think Malachi has more juice and more self-creation. I think Ty is a much more sound defender. And I think Ty is interesting next to Trae. That's a small backcourt. But Ty would, if they got him, I would be pretty happy with it. And I would see it. I think, there's some short-term stuff there with adding another shooter and adding another ball handler, while also not there is also long-term potential for that. I was hoping you'd bring him up. I was definitely going to move in that way anyways. But what I was saying is, like, yes, you're in the middle of the first round, but even typically, like, there are typically some gambles or some high, like, you have your high-end plug-and-play guys, but even the gambles, like, I'm the combo guard king. I'm the same person. Like, I'm defending Jordan Poole after game 1 of the finals. I'm defending Tyler Hero. Like, these guys, to me, these guys are incredibly valuable. Who can either, and Tyrese Maxey, Stan, like, not necessarily being your primary creator, but being a second or third guy who's capable of punishing the defense on second side actions, creating some offense on their own, working your star off the ball. Like, these guys are incredibly, incredibly valuable. They might not be your second star, but in team building, this is kind of like my favorite player to hunt. And you have a lot of potential candidates in this draft, and I am not super interested in either, in like any of them at a high level. Like Jaden Hardy, Ty, Branham, and Mathurin. Like, I like Branham. Like, he's like fringe lottery for me. I like Ty right outside the lottery. Mathurin outside the lottery. Hardy in the 20s. So, like, this is someone, like, I love these kind of players. And if I thought that there was a chance that they could return that value, I mean, that's exactly what the Hawks are looking for. Maybe even if they're a terrible defender. Like, if I thought you had – it's just – there are so many hangups with them. Like, Brandon can't guard anyone, and he's not really getting to the rim. Ty is super small, can't really get to the rim, and is a fine passer. Good defender, good shooter. Hardy, not necessarily a big-time secondary creator. Slow burst, not a very good defender. Like, it's all – which is why I guess we can kind of come back to, like, if you were to trade up for one person, Johnny Davis, because he plays defense, and I trust him to both score and create at a good enough level. Now, again, we're like standstill rim attempts, and he is definitely prone to getting walled off. Like, we know that. But in terms of attacking defense, keeping them honest, being able to run some second side stuff, and playing defense, and not being a negative, but potentially even being a positive, I think that's where he separates himself. Whereas it's an interesting class because in theory, there are a lot of secondary off guards that the Hawks could be interested in and fit. I just am not particularly high on them.
Yeah, I had to do a mock the night of the lottery for Dime, and I gave the Hawks Ty, and people got mad at me. And I wasn't saying they had to take him. I wasn't advocating for it. It just kind of made some sense. It's like a guy they could possibly take. It's the way the board fell, all that stuff. And, like, predictably, a lot of the responses like, well, he can't play the Trey. And it's like, well, I think he can.
Actually, he's not point guard to me.
That's kind of where I am. Yeah. I think maybe, obviously, there's some downside there. I kind of am leaning into the Kentucky combo guard bit because it seems to work on repeat. But no, I think that also, this is going to sound crazy, but there's nothing wrong with drafting a third guard at 16. Like, that's not the worst outcome in the world. Like, if you think that he can't be your starting shooting guard, I do understand that. Maybe that's not the greatest backcourt pairing as your primary unit, but, like, what if he's your third guard? Like, it's not, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, for me, and I'm kind of famously low on Tyler Hero in comparison to you in particular, but, like, honestly, I've been wrong so far on him. But even then, like, I kind of think he's a third guard in a lot of ways. Like, he's the best version of that guy. But, like, that's kind of what he is on some level. And, like, that's okay. Like, you're not drafting at 6 where you have to get a starter. Like, it could be fine. Anyway, we're down the rabbit hole. But I think that those guys are interesting. Like, I'm kind of with you on Hardy. But if they drafted Hardy, I would have no problem with that at all. Like, I think it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. There's 20 guys. He's on that list that would be like, okay, I probably wouldn't take him, but I get it. Like, he's usually more like, you want to score. Like, okay, he's a scorer. That's what he's supposed to be, and that's what he's been doing. And he was better late in the year. I'm sure you saw
100%.
Like,
no, 100%.
He got a lot better. He's still young. And anyway, there's so many guys.
Guys. Mark and I are planning on doing, like, a live pod or in, like, a live show during the first round of the draft.
Oh, God.
And I just feel like my reaction. I mean, obviously, it's the draft, so you're going to get a couple of reaches or unexpected stuff.
Every pick's going to be like, all right, shrug. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. Like, and that's what it's going to be. It's like, all right, like, maybe I wouldn't have done that, but I get it.
Well, that's exactly how I am with all these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the way I think I'm going to roll out, like, my board is I'm kind of so sick and tired of, like, the 60 person boards. Like, I just can't motivate myself to do it anymore. If there's 30 guys that matter, why am I ranking 60 guys? Like, 60 guys get drafted.
There's 60 picks, that's why.
Yeah, but
or 58 this year, I guess. But
I used to like, oh my God, in 2020 draft, I was like getting upset over the 47th pick. And I'm just like looking back. Like,
I do the same thing. I've kind of cooled on that too. But, like, there's definitely tweets of mine, if you go look for them, where, like, I'm really mad about the 45th pick, and it's like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But no, I think all these guys, they're not the same, but they have similar. Like, there are certainly, we talked about Easton would be a guy that I would circle. I think you would circle as well for the Hawks as, like, maybe a priority guy if he's there. Where I'll be frustrated if they don't take him on some level. But, like, all those guys we just talked about are kind of similar in a lot of ways. Oh, there's a guy I passed on my list that I was going to ask you about because I have not watched him a ton yet. Do you have an Usman Jang take? Because he seems to be, like, in the lottery now for everybody. Okay,
haven't seen him.
Okay, that's fine.
That is going to be some procrastination.
No, we're fine. I'm kind of the same way. I've watched him twice, and that's not enough for me to talk about. Okay,
I've heard that's why I'm a little scared. It's like a daunting task. I've heard he's someone you need to watch like 8 games of because it's hard to get a read.
Yeah, just to reveal, I watched one game and I was like, what? This guy's not a thing. And then I watched the second game. I was like, okay, I kind of get it. But it's 2 games. It's not enough for me to give an opinion. But to your point, they were very wide. Like, the first game, I kind of just picked at random, and he was terrible in the first game. I was like, this guy's not a thing. I don't know what's going on here. And it was like the same week as, like, he started getting, like, lottery buzz, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense at all. Anyway, Oh, is there anybody we
That
haven't talked
seems
about yet that you like? Because like there's this like I tried to make my long list and just kind of say names out loud too. I'm gonna do that now. So like EJ Liddell or Jalen Williams from Santa Clara or Bryce
so. Yeah,
McGowan's or
Jalen
Kendall Brown
Williams.
or whatever.
Jalen Williams. Let's talk about Jalen
Jalen
Williams
Williams,
because
okay.
he is interesting. He is again not so. I don't think solving your problems. He's older. He is not a great athlete, but I really buy the shot. He shot it really well this year. Legit second side operator as a like very good pick and roll operator. I think that's what's kind of rising in the class. Like we're so starved of pick and roll operators that like we see this guy doing WCAC and hitting the roll. Like, oh, it's got lotto. So I'm not quite
Yeah.
there. Like he religiously hits the roll. I've watched I think 5 games of his, and I have not seen him spray to the corner once. But he's very good at hitting the roll, and he manipulates the hell out of the low man to hit the roll. Incredibly patient, incredibly seasoned, very poised. Just kind of like reeks of one of those guys that's going to stick in the league. You don't know how high the ceiling is going to get or what level he's going to contribute to, but you get the feeling that he's going to help someone and play in the league and be a rotation piece. So for the Hawks, I find his skill set particularly interesting because the secondary creation stuff is absolutely there. Like I don't like he had 25 dunks on the year. I don't think he's a 25 dunk athlete.
He wouldn't have done that, I don't think, in a different context.
I agree. And there is some stuff even in like WCC games where it's like, I don't really think you're getting that off. Like even just like driving the lane and like freezing the big and getting downhill for a layup. I was just like, I don't know about that. But I do think a lot of his game is translatable. He's a legit passer, very smart player. Struggles as a point of attack defender just because like he's super uptight, and isn't super quick, but very smart off the ball. Knows team responsibilities, it can get into passing lanes. Obviously has that +8 wingspan, which aids him a lot in passing lanes and as a playmaker. Allows him to open up windows, slip passes in there over the defense. So he's someone. I was talking about him yesterday with people, and I was like, I'm not saying I'd do 16, but I'd be thinking about it. So
Yeah.
he's definitely someone like I need to rewatch Hardy, but I think I might like prefer him to Hardy in a vacuum. Obviously, Hardy's a little bit more of an upside play. He's younger. The shooting versatility is more elite, but I trust Williams as a pick and roll player more, and I trust the defense. So I think that's kind of pick your poison, depending on what you're going for. But I don't think it's crazy for him in this range. Now, I don't necessarily think he's a lotto talent, but we just talked about what is a lotto talent.
And that's not where the Hawks are anyway. I mean, the Hawks are technically not in the lottery this year, but no,
exactly.
Him and Blake Wesley was something that someone posted to me the other day, and I was like, they're just complete opposites in a lot of different ways.
Opposites.
And it's like, so what do you want? I mean, what do you want? I mean, and only Travis Schlenk can answer that, like what he's actually looking for. Like if you want upside, it's not Jalen Williams. If you want someone who's going to be a safer NBA player, it's probably Jalen Williams of those two guys. So it's just an interesting, like hypothetical. It's the same thing as like, we don't go down this road, but like the Pat Baldwin road. And it's like,
I don't know.
I don't know what your
I don't
tolerance level is for Pat Baldwin. Like, I don't know.
I don't know if I'm going to rank him. I genuinely like,
I get it.
What am I supposed to be evaluating?
Basically, to like Pat Baldwin, you kind of have to just like not watch college basketball. Like if you just go off of his high school.
But even that he played in a public high school and was hurt for the majority of his senior year. He didn't have a last summer of AAU. Like there's not even a Shaedon sample is better than his. Like
which is crazy.
It's crazy, but it's better. So I really wanted Pat to go back another year at school because I really did like the stuff I saw in FIBA and the stuff we saw in 2019 summer when he was a rising junior playing EYBL up a year with Jalen Johnson on that Phenom U team. So I really wanted to see more from him. It's just like I don't. If I'm a GM, like I'm probably not picking him. Like to be honest, I don't know.
No, I totally get it. I mean, I can also see a team like once you get past like I don't know, 15 30, or whatever. 30. Yeah,
even I honestly like. I would struggle to pick him in the first as someone who was ridiculously high on him coming into the year, and even his first couple of games, like I don't know what I'm getting to be honest.
No, I totally understand. I mean, he's maybe the best example of like you don't know what you're supposed to understand about him. I asked this to everybody, and I think the answer at the top end is probably Paolo, so you can say that too. But do you have your guy, quote unquote, in this class? Like it might be it's a sleeper instead of Paulo.
I mean, it's
maybe
tough.
Paulo, but
It's tough. I was actually thinking about this today while I was watching, because in previous drafts, like I've had quote unquote like Malachi Flynn was my guy, and he was like my 21st ranked prospect. Like I look in my 20s, I'm like, God damn, like I don't even. This feels too high. So I think I would say Paulo. I would say Paulo. Just because I am like I obviously have like I know a lot of people that have him as the number one. I do think I'm probably even higher on like his potential and the ceiling outcome. So I mean, I guess you could say that. Ivy maybe. I think maybe relative, but I only have him third. Johnny, I have Johnny fifth on my board, which is pretty high.
That's pretty high now, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess maybe Johnny you could say.
Do you have a deeper like do you have a guy that's like you see mocked in the 20s and 30s that you have higher than that? Like is there a deeper guy for you? Because like my guy in that range is go ahead.
Who's your guy? Who's your guy?
I really like Dalen Terry.
Okay, Mark and I are going to talk about him on Thursday.
I think it would not be insane to draft him at 16, and I wouldn't do it. I don't think, but if I took him at 16, I'd be like, all right. And I love him, so I know that's too high. I know it's too high, so I understand. But like, he's the kind of guy that I just absolutely love. Like, I know people like Josh Minot's a popular answer for this question that people just love.
So I said no really aggressively there because
I get it.
Quick side anecdote. Two of my best friends at school went to the same high school as Josh Minot.
As Josh Minot? Interesting.
Yes, one played on the team, one was the manager. So he's a year younger than me. So
you inside info on Josh Minot. That's what
while we were freshmen, they obviously know I take drafts guy like, yo, we got our boy top 30 going to Memphis, like potential first round pick. I'm like, yo, it's sick. Like I can't wait to watch him. And I watch him. Just like I remember calling him like I watched 3 Memphis games. Like what's the skill? Like what am I banking on? Like I really want to like it. And they were just like, yeah, he's NBA body. I'm like, oh, okay. So like,
I guess,
no, Josh Minot, like if you take him, he's a second round guy to me. Like if you're super comfortable in your player development staff, I really like his motor. He does play super hard. He makes plays. Obviously, he's a freak athlete. I just don't necessarily buy like any of the skills just yet. But again, back half of the second round, your guess is as good as mine. So if you trust your player development staff, and you're comfortable with a blank canvas of tools and motor, which I do want to give him credit, like very high motor, and plays his ass off, which is good, but not necessarily my kind of guy, not necessarily my kind of gamble. I have a couple guys maybe I guess I can throw out. I'll say I don't know if, and he seems to be getting first round buzz. Jake Laravia from Wake, I do like him. I think he's pretty solid. The shooting is real. Super smart, good cutter, knows how to just like. I just like that role he played at Wake that he was really damn good in. Like I think that's a lot of NBA teams could use that. Just like you're a modern four who can play the low man, maybe attack in spurts. You kind of wish the creation was a little bit more, but I do buy the shot and knows how to play off the ball. Jalen Williams, again, I do like it seems like he's more of a first round guy now, so we don't spend too much. And we did just talk about him. David Roddy, I like. He's funky, man. I like him.
I did too. It seemed like he had kind of a rough combine. I didn't watch the combine.
I haven't seen the combine. Yeah, I
didn't see it either, but I got the reports were not great on David Roddy at the combine, but like that's okay. I don't think that's like the panic thing. It's kind of
no, he's not for, and I get like he's not for everyone. But like he's really skilled. He wowed me just as versatile as a shooter he was. Like I was not expecting him to take movement threes and pull up threes. I do think it'd be advantageous if he can slim down a little bit, just because I think he's like a little free. Yeah. And I think he does benefit where like being big, like that's absolutely like he can guard up. Is very smart defensively. I do think he can play some forward, despite him being literally like I think he's 6'5". Because he is so big, and I think he can guard up, and he's super strong. Like capable passer, capable ball handler, but I do think slimming down just a little bit to become a little bit more mobile. I wish he like looked to attack and score more. Like a lot of his buckets in my viewings, he's someone I do need to watch more of. But it came in like the posts when he was isolated and was getting buckets that way or from threes. Like wish I saw like a little bit more aggressiveness while attacking closeouts. But he's definitely something I'm intrigued with. Like at least I know what I'm getting there. Like yes, we might need to slim down a little bit, but I know I'm getting a skilled two-way player who could potentially contribute and like be a unique look. I think. I'm trying to look who else in this like. I've been saying Andrew Nemhard as a second round guard. Maybe not for the Hawks.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
for teams,
the Hawks pick at 44, and it's like people always ask me like, who's the guy at 44? And it's like, well,
I got no
it's
idea.
44. I don't know who's going to be there, in even more so than 16. Like,
Yeah.
somebody's probably going to fall to you that I like. Like, for instance, if Dalen Terry is there at 44, you just send the card in my opinion. But who knows? I kind of like Max Christie, but it seems like he's going to go before that probably.
Christie, I like
kind of
that
like
there.
him. Yeah.
I do like that there. So Christie was someone I was super high on early in the year. The off the dribble stuff just didn't come along like I thought it would. Even
he had
a
rough year for sure. But like,
I mean, at 44, at 44, like that, but like his not frame, but size as a shooting guard. That shooting stroke is pure as it gets, and I like him on defense as well. He's good at point of attack. He's good off the ball. So yeah, at 44, I'm totally cool with him. Trying to maybe think like
I have to keep my streak alive and say Arkansas Jalen Williams. I say it on every podcast.
No, you're missing
like
me. That's where
you
miss me. I can't win.
I mean, I'm just saying at 44, it's like I have
too much integrity for that. If you never contest,
is it the charge drawing?
If you never contest on the basketball court, you're not. If you don't contest, you don't even attempt to contest.
I am definitely going to tweet out something about you saying you have too much integrity for Jalen Williams. Oh, that's incredible. I love that. You're not wrong.
No. In all seriousness, like he's super skilled. I also just like I'm not quite like the charge shove aside. I'm not quite there with the offense. Like I think it's a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more theoretical because he's a center size guy who can pass, but passing is good. It's not like transcendent enough. I don't really buy the shot, and he's smaller and more ground bound, so I think the scoring is a little tough. So in like from a real prospect, like if you were taking him in the second, fine. But he's just not totally my kind of guy. He's small, man. Like he's only 6'9", and he has some trouble finishing against size. Like most notably in that Duke game, I think if I recall correctly, he definitely struggled to finish around Mark Will. So yeah, not necessarily my kind of guy, but again, like I'll keep saying this in every podcast and every time. Your second round flyers is as good as mine.
Yeah,
so,
it does. I totally
definitely not. I'm definitely not mad about any of it.
Before we get out of here, just to like put a point on the Hawks stuff, it seems like, in a vacuum, maybe Tari Easton's like a best case scenario for what you can see, like in terms of realistic stuff, not trade up options, but guys falling to 16. Does that sound right to you?
I mean, I really like Tari. I really like the fit. I think it's a little different, is what I'd say. I think while I do like Ochai there, Ochai feels a little rinse repeat for me in terms of you're getting a sound floor spacer who like Ochai.
He's shooting guard size too. Like that's the thing. Like they have
I feel like the Hawks do have a bunch of those guys, and I do. We talked about the philosophy and ideology of getting all these guys in the building, seeing who beats out who, and rolling the ball out, like good old who's going to outplay who. I do think that gets a little bit more interesting if you at least have contrasting styles and contrasting skill sets. Like if we're just rolling out 3 or 4 of the same space, you can't really run a second side action. Your defense is meh. You're a really good catch and shoot shooter. Like
I think that's the thing. By the way, just to like put a point on that, like I think that there's this notion out there that he's this like really, really good defender that doesn't really exist on tape. That's kind of, I'm not trying to pick on him.
He was defending earlier in the year. In the year, he was defending, and I was sending clips around like, "Hey,
I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be fine. I don't think he's going to be good defensively.
He had some real rough lapses.
I mean, again, this is anecdotal because I was courtside for the Final Four, like I was 10 or whatever it was, media stuff, and I was like, I'm watching him almost more than everybody else because of just prospect stuff, and I'm thinking like the defense is just not. It kind of confirmed what I'd already seen. His defense
was not good there.
No, it was, and I think he'll be fine. But I think that's one of the things. If you're the Hawks in particular, like you kind of need to think he's a better defender than what you already have at the 2, and I'm not sure he is. Like I think if you compare him to Kevin Huerter defensively, people that have not ever watched both guys will be like, "Oh, Agbaji for sure," and it's like. I don't think that's necessarily true. Obviously that's a one-off, but it's just he's one of those guys that like you just wish he was a little bit better on defense to fit the archetype. Because like your guys like Branham, like Branham's defense is really bad too, but like he has more juice, which is I think the way you put it earlier, and I agree with. So I don't know. It's just we've talked about a lot of guys, and we both like Tari Easton, so we can circle that right now. But I'm not sure what else we could say.
Yeah, and I think the Hawks are. It's an interesting place. Like, what are you gonna do with these guys you signed in free agency that kind of like bolstered your run a couple years back? What do the second contracts look like for the guys that you hit on in the draft? I think what we said, you have an obligation to be competitive, and I absolutely mean that to be true. I don't necessarily think saying they're not good enough is the wrong way to say it, but I don't necessarily think they're in the tier where you're just like, yep, we're going to get a guy we can plug and play and we're washing our hands and moving on. Like, I do think they have room to get a little funky, which is like your Tari, your Blake Wesley. And, if it doesn't pan out, then I don't think that's like you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're at 16 coming off a funky year and you're kind of in team building limbo with, you have these influx of young guys that you're trying to decide who's going to stay long term. You have these influx of older guys who are kind of on the way out. It's like undoubtedly did the right thing by signing him. Got to signing those guys. Got to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that we are well beyond deciding if that was correct process or not. But they're on the books, and those guys are aging a little bit. Like I do think while the Hawks are going to remain the Hawks are going to be competitive for as long as Trae Young. Like, he's that good. He's a caliber of player. But as we said, not everything's linear. And I do think they are in a little bit of a funky situation right now where the long-term future is a little bit cloudy. Like, you obviously tell me if you disagree. You are well more equipped on them.
No, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. And also something I've been saying a lot even recently, because it's just the way people are talking about it. Like, you also are not drafting for the next 2 years. Especially as a rookie, you're like, I know that's a temptation in draft discourse is like, well, this guy can help you right away. That should not be, it might be a little bit of a factor, but it shouldn't be a big factor in what especially if you're the Hawks and you're already deep with guys who are going to be playing. Like, let's just say, for instance, you draft Ochai because you think he's going to be able to play faster. Like, you know what? He's not right now. He's not better than the guys you already have playing on the wing right now. Absolutely. Today. He's not. And that's one of the appeals of him is that he's closer to the NBA, but like, he's not better than Kevin Huerter right now. I promise you that. He's not. So like, that shouldn't be your thought process. It's the same thing as like, obviously the Nate Millen factor complicates things, but he didn't play Jalen Johnson really at all last year. But, I try to say that ahead of time, like, you're not drafting Jalen Johnson for his rookie season. Like, you're hoping he hits 2 or 3 years from now. And that's the case even for the guys who are more NBA ready, like your Tari Eason guy, which is we'll use that as an example. Like, you're hoping maybe he can help you a little bit as a rookie, but like, you're drafting him for 2024 and 25. Yeah. That's what you're doing. So it's always important to keep that in mind. I'm not telling you, Jake. I'm telling everybody else. I know you know this.
No, absolutely.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, no, and then that's kind of like the last point I wanted to leave it off, and why the Hawks are kind of one of the more fascinating franchises, in my opinion, right now, especially when you're talking about teams that are drafting here, because I don't necessarily think, again, saying they're not good enough, like, I don't want to say that. It's like they went through a really rough year, and I'm generally like a big fan of the Hawks and Trae, and especially Huerter. I'm a big Huerter fan. But I don't necessarily think they're like equipped enough to blindly just say, let's run it back. Like, we're making no changes. Like, we're running it back.
They're not gonna, by the way. It's not
yeah. They're not going to. So kind of take out like your top 8 or your top third of the league who feel good about what they did, made a good run, or had an early exit, but they're comfortable. Like, they're like, I like what we had. Either we called a raw deal in round one, or we can just refine up around the edges. Like, take out, your top 8, we'll call them. Then you have your first 8, which is like, we have no direction. We have a lot of young guys. We're picking towards the top. We're just trying to roll with this and see as we go. Like, the Hawks are in this really fascinating middle ground where it's like they competed at a high level 2 years ago. They kind of fell off a little bit. The guys that used to compete are aging out a little bit. The guys that were on the rookie contracts and were the surprises are approaching the second contract. They have a superstar, but like, they have this one glaring need. It's a lot of moving pieces. Is kind of what I'll say. So like, I think it is a little, I don't want to say hectic, but it's cloudy. Like, I can't really tell you where Atlanta's going to be in 2 years, which just kind of makes this draft even more difficult because you're essentially trying to hit a moving target, right? Like, we're trying to hit a player for 2025, but we don't know what we're going to need in 2025. So I do think that's why I do think they have some grounds to get a little funky, which is I don't know if that's as funky as Wesley, but Tari. Like I think Tari's certainly entertaining and fascinating. But that's it. Maybe it is Wesley. Who knows? Who knows?
I was gonna say. I mean, they could easily justify pretty much anything. There's like archetypes that you don't want. Like again, you don't want. But even that, like the only guy in even first round range that's like that's a pure small point guard is Kenny Chandler. You're not taking him,
who I love, and
I like him too, but like you can't.
It's not happening. Yeah,
with Trae Young, you can't take him. And then like again, like your Mark Williams, Walker Kesslers, you can't take either. But other than that, basically any other guy is like at least any other archetype is on the table. So it really does. It is funky. I like that. I like that word choice because it is really interesting. And candidly, I don't know still, and I'm trying to figure this out for people to listen to the podcast. I don't know what they're prioritizing because I know the guys that I think Travis Schlenk would like based on all the conversations that we've had together and what he said publicly. Like he's a dribble pass shoot guy. He's a skill guy. He doesn't really prioritize athleticism that much usually. Like if you look at who they've drafted, they haven't drafted like hyper athletes. They like to draft the skill guys for the most part. And I know who fits that bill, but like maybe he goes away from it on purpose this time. I don't know. Yeah. So we'll see. I know it's kind of I can tell you who the Schlenk guys are, but I don't know if he's going to take them this time. So
yeah, no, I think that's I would say like that's pretty similar to the way I approach things. Like everyone, I would say is everyone wants to dribble pass shoot guys until the dribble pass shoot guys are right in front of them on the clock and they take the tools guys. So
he doesn't really do that. It really is.
No,
I find Schlenk fascinating because of that. Yeah. Like honestly, because like he does do what he says for the most part. He does do what he says he likes. Like Amari Spellman was that. I mean, in theory, it didn't work, and I kind of hated that pick when it happened. But like that's what he was supposed to be, like this super skilled, undersized center prospect. And like he does kind of bet on himself. And Travis, like that's the other thing about Travis is like if he falls in love with a guy, he'll just take the guy. He doesn't care. Like he does not care. So if he thinks Jalen Williams is the guy, he'll just take him. I promise you.
Yeah.
So
and I see it. Like I wouldn't hate it. I absolutely wouldn't hate it.
I understand. Well, you've made a ton of time, so I'm gonna get you out of here. It's been like 90 minutes or something of this conversation.
That's a lot of fun.
But Jake, you plugged yourself at the beginning, which I wanted to make you do in case I split this up into 2 episodes. So we're going to do it here again at the end. Please go ahead and tell everybody where they can find your work. Because honestly, I'm a listener to the podcast with Mark, who was on the show already as well, and I read all your stuff, and I'm a big fan of what I'd say that whether you're here or not.
Thanks,
but please share where people can find your stuff.
Well, one, I appreciate that. It definitely means a lot. It's a taxing time of year, but also very rewarding. So you can find me as it's linked on the video if you're watching this on video, but my Twitter is @JakeInThePaint. That's kind of where all my stuff will be put out. The written stuff will be for Cerebo Sports on our Substack, so you can subscribe to that to get updates. I will be putting out some pieces. Friend of the program, PD Webb, will also be putting out some pieces also through the Substack, so be on the lookout for those. And for the pod, Mark and I will be doing a few more episodes until the draft. That is called Tag the Roll. Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And stay on the lookout. We'll be doing a live show during the draft. So come hang out with us. Come be in the comment section. I'm kind of stressing out a little bit if we're going to do like notifications or not notifications, because I typically like to go off the air and do no notifications. But I feel like if we're in like a chat room, I feel like it's just bound to get spoiled. So,
yeah, there's something will happen.
Yeah, that's TBD. We're TBD on there, but definitely be on the lookout for that. We'll have details about where that's going to be, how to access it, and all that good stuff with more time as we get closer. But yeah, until then, check out the podcast. Follow me on Twitter. DMs are always open. Just love talking basketball. And thank you for having me on. This was a lot of fun. As you can see, I'm definitely passionate about the draft, but also team building, and the Hawks pretty much blend the two of those better than anyone right now.
Yeah, they're really interesting. Thank you again for doing this. I would recommend as a draft night plan watching Jake and Mark, and then listening to this podcast after that's over. So there you go. You get all the Hawks stuff, get all the draft stuff, and we'll meld the minds together. As for everybody that listens to the podcast, please subscribe to this show. Once again, check out Jake's work, Tag the Roll, etc. And we'll see you all next time.